Recording.
Okay, so we're continuing with the trial of King David, the trials of King David. And just to summarize, to remind ourselves, we'll go over again, but after the episode of Bathsheba and Uriah, we said that the Abarbanel, the great Torah commentator from the court of Spain at the time of Columbus, says that there are 5 charges against the king, King David, arising out of the story of Bathsheba and Uriah. The first, that he committed adultery with a married woman. She was married to Uriah, apparently. Seems clear from the verses. Secondly, he tried to cover it up. Remember, he sent for the husband for Uriah. I'm not going through in detail. And he tried to send him home so that he would be with his wife, so that, because he knew now that Bathsheba was pregnant, and he hoped this way that people would think that Uriah was the father of the baby that was to be born. That was number 2. Number 3, he had Uriah killed. We know he sent him back to the front line with a letter to Yoav, the general, to tell him to put him right at the front, where the battle was fiercest, to make sure that he got killed. Very serious. The 4th was a result of that. Some innocent men also got killed. Other soldiers got killed who were with Uriah at the time of the battle. And the 5th charge was that immediately after she finished her mourning period, he took Bathsheba back as his wife, didn't wait any time. And we said that we brought a Talmud from the Yerushalmi that said during the 6 months that David was in flight from his son Absalom, he no longer had the law of a king. It doesn't exactly say that. It says it in an oblique way, as is the custom of the Gemara, that we learn a law from infants. But it's so interesting, I'll say it again. The Gemara said that Rav Huna said that during the 6 months that David was in flight from Absalom, if he had to bring a sin offering, he bought a female goat. He wouldn't have to bring a sin offering because we didn't have the temple. But as I said, we can learn laws from hypothetical cases. And the law is that if a man has to bring a sin offering for a serious offense which he commits by negligence or recklessness without due intent, for example, I said lighting a fire on Shabbat where he forgot it was Shabbat, or he forgot that he wasn't allowed to light a fire. So he has to bring a sin offering, which is a female goat. But a king, or the Nasi, the king or the head of the community, doesn't bring a female goat, he has to bring a male goat. So when the Gemara says that at the 6 months that David was in flight from Absalom, his son, he brought a female goat, so the inference is clear that during those 6 months he did not have the law of a king. And I said there are 2 possibilities of explaining this. One was the mere fact that he was in flight from Absalom meant that he no longer had the authority of a king. He left Jerusalem, the capital, and a king is not in flight. A king, by definition, is a king. He rules, and he wasn't ruling at that time. However, I said it was more likely, and I have proofs, that there was some kind of judicial tribunal, and that at the very least there was an interim decision of that tribunal that, let's say, before David came to be judged before the tribunal, he would not have the law of a king, and David did not come to be judged by the tribunal, he ran away instead. So then I wanted to go into the history and the circumstances of the revolt of Absalom. And the revolt of Absalom took place some years after the whole story of Bathsheba and Uriah, and on the face of it is not related. But it seems to me that the whole story of Bathsheba and Uriah was the basis of the tribunal, of the judicial inquiry, assuming there was. So we started talking about Absalom, but in order to understand about Absalom, we had to go way back. Absalom, we said, was the third son of David. The first son was called Amnon. The second son has two names. His name is Daniel, and he's called Caleb. And the third son was Absalom. Absalom's mother was Maacah, and we said Maacah was the daughter of the king of Geshur, who was an enemy of David, and it would appear that Maacah was captured by David during a battle before David became king, even before he became king in Hebron, when he was in flight from Shaul, and he was near or around the area of the Philistine, and he had skirmishes. He fought some of the enemy that were marauding at that time. And even though Geshur is in the other side of the country, the northeast of the country, near Syria, it would appear that they had sent an army down marauding in the southwestern part, and as seems to be the custom, some women accompanied the army at that time, because we know that there is a whole parsha in the Torah that if at the time someone takes a captive and he sees a beautiful woman among the captives and he desires her, then he is allowed to have relations with her at least once, and then if she converts, he can marry her. What's a woman doing in the battle? And particularly here, Maacah is not just, is the daughter of the king. So it would seem likely that during the battle, the king also took his household with him, and his daughter was captured. And this daughter, Maacah, is the mother of Absalom, and she is also the mother of a girl called Tamar. Very interesting. Tamar, of course, we will see again, is connected to Yehuda. In fact, Tamar is the mother of the whole line of the princes of Yehuda. She is, I can't remember offhand how many generations, but she is many generations of the mother of the female line from which David came. So it's ironic that this sister of Absalom, who is the daughter of David by Maacah, also has the name of Tamar. So there was a whole very unpleasant story involving Amnon and Tamar, and in turn involving Absalom. Before going into the details of this story, I want to give a background which will explain to some extent how such a terrible thing, which we'll hear about, happened. Now let's go back to the story of David and Bathsheba and Uriah. We remember in brief that David gets up from his couch, he goes for a walk on the roof of his palace, he sees a beautiful girl bathing, naked. He asks his servants, "Who's that?" They say, "Oh, that's Bathsheba, the wife of Uriah." He sends for her, the messengers bring her to him. He has sexual relations with her. She goes home. She sends him a message, "I'm pregnant." Oh, pregnant, that's a problem. He didn't anticipate that. So what's he going to do? She's the wife of Uriah, apparently. So he sends to his general Yoav. Uriah is in his army, fighting with Yoav against Ammon, which is modern-day Jordan. And he said, send Uriah back to me. So Uriah comes back, thinking that he's coming back to report to David on the progress of the war. He reports on the progress of the war. David says, very good, now go home to your wife and wash your feet. I said it may be a euphemism for having relations with her. And Uriah won't do that. He goes outside and he said, I'm not going to go home. I'm in the army are all out in the field. So he sleeps with the soldiers outside David's palace. So David hears he did go home to his wife, so he tries again. He brings him back the second night. This time he gives him plenty to drink. He was drunk. And now he says, go back home to your wife. Again he wouldn't do it, sleeps outside. So now that didn't work. His whole idea would be that it would be thought that Uriah was the father of the baby that was going to be born by Bathsheba. So he has another plan, and he sends Uriah back to Yoav with a letter to Yoav saying, make sure that you put Uriah right in the front of the battle, right up against the wall, and make sure he gets killed. And this is
say
what
that in the letter, make sure he gets killed?
Yeah, he says to him, I'll quote what he said.
Did Uriah ever consummate the marriage with Bathsheba, or no?
We shall come to that in due course. We shall come to that in due course. He said, he wrote in the letter saying, put Uriah directly in front of the fierce fighting, then withdraw from behind him, so he's left on his own, so that he shall be struck and die. Couldn't have anything more explicit than that. And that's what happened. And then as soon as the mourning was over, the mourning period of Bathsheba was over, he took Bathsheba home and he made her his wife. And that chapter finishes, V'yera hadavar asher asa David b'nei Hashem. And it was bad, evil, the thing that David did in the eyes of Hashem. The thing, he doesn't say the things, the thing, but it's really all one episode. Okay. So now I want, in order to explain what's going to happen with Absalom and with Amnon and with Tamar, I want to read the next chapter, the beginning of the next chapter. And I said at the beginning when we started that there were in fact 3 tribunals that judged King David. One was a tribunal of the courts below, the civil court. One was the tribunal in the heavenly court. And the third was the court of public opinion. So now we're concerned with the heavenly court. It says, after this episode, that the Almighty sent Nathan to David. And Nathan is the prophet, although the book is called the Book of Shmuel. Shmuel had died some years before, and Nathan was his successor. He was the prophet. So the Almighty sent Nathan to David. A prophet goes to the king, and he came to him, and he tells him a story. He didn't say it's a story that wasn't true. He gave him an account of a parrot episode. He said to him, there are 2 men in one city. One man was rich, and the other man was poor. Poor. And he said the rich man had sheep and oxen in great plentiful of sown, which is sheep and goats, and bakar, which is cattle. But the poor man, he didn't have anything at all except one little lamb. He had one little lamb, and he had apparently had bought this little lamb. And he raised it, and he grew up with it, and they were together with him and his children, and this lamb ate from his bread, and drank from his cup, and lay in his bosom. It was like a daughter to him. The poor man had this one little lamb, where he had this very dear, close relationship. Now we come back to the rich man. So he said that there was a traveler who came to the rich man, and the rich man wanted to entertain him. A traveler comes, he wants to give him food, but he didn't want to take from his own flock or his own herd. He had plenty, could very easily spare a lamb or a calf to make a meal for the guest, but he didn't want to do that. And so he took the little lamb from the poor man, and he made the Suda, the meal, for the guest that came to him. David heard the story. What a terrible thing. Here's a rich man, he's got all the cattle, all the sheep in the world, and in order to entertain someone, he takes away the one little lamb that the poor man had. So David was very angry about this man. And he said to Natan, he said, Chai Hashem, like an oath, he said, as the living, in the living God, as the living God lives, is Ben Movet. He deserves to die. More than he deserves to die, he has a judgment of death. This man who did such a thing. And as for the little sheep, the little lamb that he stole, he shall have to pay 4 times because he did this terrible thing and because he had no mercy on him. So David, outrageous, outrageous. This poor man, one poor man has one little lamb and the rich man takes it, kills it to give it to his guest. David says 2 things. One is that he is a Ben Movis, he has to die, and secondly, he has to pay 4 times for the lamb. I'll discuss this in a moment. So Natan the prophet says to him, to David, he says to him, you're the man, you're the rich man. And this is what the Almighty, the God of Israel says. He says, through me to you, David, he says, I appointed you to be king on Israel. I anointed you to be king on Israel. And I saved you from the hand of Shaul. We learned, and we'll learn again, that for a long period Shaul was trying to kill David, pursuing him, and the Almighty saved David from Shaul. So the Almighty says, I anointed you to be king on Israel, I saved you from the hand of Shaul, and I gave you the house of your master. Let's say he gave you the kingdom, I gave you the kingdom from Shaul, and it says the wives, or might be the women of your master in your lap. What does that exactly mean? There's a difference of opinion. Certainly he gave Michal, who was the daughter of Shaul, to be David's wife, his first wife. There's a question that maybe David also married one of Shaul's wives. Or just in a general sense, when I gave you the house of Shaul, I gave you his women as well, you are now the authority. And I gave you the house of Israel and Yehuda. Not only Yehuda, which was your tribe when you were first king in Hebron, but also all of Israel. I gave all of Israel to you to be king. And if that's not enough for you, so I'll add to you Hena v'Hena, this and this. Some say that that means that David at that time had 6 wives, and if you didn't have enough wives, you can have another 6 and another 6. 18 in all, from which we learn a halacha that a king was allowed to have 18 wives. But in general, the Almighty says to David, anything that you wanted, I gave you. And what's more, I'll give you more and more. So why did you scorn the word of the Almighty to do this evil thing in my eyes? Uriah the Hittite you struck with a sword. His wife you took for yourself as a wife. And again it repeats, and you killed him with the sword of the Bnei Ammon, the sons of Ammon, who were the enemy who were fighting, Uriah was fighting them at that time. And now she says, sword will not cease from your house forever, because you scorned me, and you took the wife of Uriah the Hittite to be a wife for yourself. I just interpose. We remember that we started by bringing a Gemara Talmud in Shabbat that said, anyone who says that David sinned is mistaken. Very clear, unequivocal statement in the Talmud. Anyone who says that David sinned is mistaken. It seems a little hard, based not only on the facts we've told, but here the judgment of the Almighty. He says to him, now the sword will not cease from your house forever, because you despised me, and you took the wife of Uriah the Hittite to be a wife for yourself. We shall learn, when it comes to the defense, that David, according to those who defend him, and we'll bring the Malbim, great rabbi, that he wasn't guilty of adultery. But it certainly seems from what Natan the prophet is saying to him that he was. So he says, Natan continues, this is what the Almighty says, behold, I will bring evil upon you from your own household, and I will take your wives in front of you, and I will give them to your fellow, and he will live, he will have relations with your wives in the full view of this son, because what you did in secret I will do for you in the face of all of Israel and in the face of all the sons. And David said to Natan, I have sinned to the Almighty. I have sinned to the Almighty. So we shall see that what happens with Amnon and Tamar and Absalom is a consequence or part of this judgment that the Almighty puts on David through Natan. So when he said that blood will not cease from your hand, from your house, so that from this time on, David is living under a terrible judgment. And we shall see as we continue the effects of this. But I want to spend a little time on this episode with Natan the prophet. Now, although I said last week that certainly the incident with Uriah that he tells Yoav to send Uriah to his death became known. How did it become known? Because the letter, which we talked about a few moments ago, the letter which David sent to his general, the general did not destroy it, he didn't burn it, he kept it in his pocket, and at some time he showed it to one or two people so that there would be no criticism of him. Question of whether he was to blame. Yoav is a very interesting question. I'll just outline the question now. Normally speaking, the law is that if someone sends someone else to do a sin, man sends some people to do a robbery, so the person who sends them is not guilty, the people who do the actual crime are guilty. Because we have a rule, Divrei Harav, Divrei Eved, who do we listen to? Talmud, who do we listen to? The rabbi tells you something, or the Talmud tells you something else, you listen to the rabbi. So the rabbi is the Almighty. If the Almighty says don't do such a thing, and someone else says do it, so you can't rely on Eichmann's defense and say, well, I was only carrying out orders. You're not supposed to carry out orders if those orders are against the will of the Almighty. However, there are two possible exceptions to this. Shammai says that that rule does not apply to murder. If someone sends someone else to kill someone, then the person who sends him is also guilty, is responsible. Because it's such a serious offense. And it also may not apply, this is a question, if the king sends someone to do it, because you have to listen to the king, you're not allowed to rebel against the king. We'll see that that's not necessarily so. If the king tells someone to do something against the law, maybe it's not so. But it is an important question. Incidentally, they say that the snake had this defense. When the Almighty says to the snake at the time of in the Garden of Eden, "Are you guilty? Look what you did. You made them eat from the fruit." So the snake could have said, "Well, it's not my fault. You told